Welcome to our first brown bag lunch meeting of the year. Today we are joined by Livia Vanaver, who is a board member at Laurel Waldorf School, but also was one of the founding families, one of the first families. I'm going to hand it over to Livia. I will let her introduce herself and then dive right into speaking about the origins of Mountain Laurel and what Waldorf education has given to her family, and maybe even continuing on to what she hopes the legacy of her building is.
Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Livia Vanaver, and I have a dance and music company called the Vanaver Caravan. We moved to the Hudson Valley in 1973 and to the New Paltz area in 1974. When our oldest son, Elijah, was 4 years old, at that time, you know where SUNY New Paltz is? The part that faces the Hasbrook Field, that part was the campus school. And SUNY New Paltz was very known for education, training teachers. And that was a fantastic school that so many of the kids who I now know, who grew up in the area and who I'm still close with as adults, went to the campus school. That school was closing. And we thought, oh, this would be a great school for Elijah to go to, but it was closed. So I made a sign that said, looking for alternative education, call this number, with little fringes on the bottom of the sheet. We put them up in health food stores and all the stores in town. And we got together a group of about 30 people who were interested in alternative education. And at that time, we lived in the barn on Route 32 and River Road. We had a big loft. So in one part of the loft, we had all the kids and a couple of fun babysitters. And the parents would meet in the living loft and really speak about what we were looking for our children. After meeting for a few months, I decided to invite the headmasters of about 6 different schools to come and do 20-minute presentations, and we would all be there. They could, bring brochures about their schools and everything. One of the people who came was an anthroposophist who lived in Kingston, and he talked about Waldorf education. And when he spoke about the teacher standing before the class and looking at the children and knowing that these are beings that might be, who knows what they have so much potential, and that Waldorf education addressed the spiritual aspect of the little beings, as well as reading, writing, arithmetic, and also that it was very arts-based and nature-based. We thought, this is for us. So Bill and myself and 2 of the musicians in our company, Toby and Evan, and 10 other families got together and tried to figure out how we were going to start a Waldorf school, because only maybe one of the families were anthroposophists. So really, we started a Waldorf school as opposed to one that developed over time from an anthroposophical study group. I'll just say also, out of that meeting came people who were interested in High Meadow. And so High Meadow started from that meeting, and also a very robust homeschool group. So 3 different alternative education systems came from those meetings together. So there's such a wish that you have for your children. And there's nothing more important than education from a ground level, from the young moving up from there. I think we were introduced also to Waldorf education at Omega, where there was a man from Green Meadow who was there as part of some spiritual week. There was a lot of ideas coming in about the system. And we had to look for a teacher. We had to start with nursery kindergarten. We had a house on North Oakwood Terrace, and the bottom floor became the nursery kindergarten. And the top floor was for our first teacher and his wife and his young daughter. And I'm so happy that Eric Gidzig is here on the call today because I'd love you to just give some background, Eric, if you would, about what it was like and how you were approached and why you came. And I think that will give everybody a good entree into the rest of the story.
It was a very interesting beginning. It was quite a beginning. I was invited to come up and speak to the parent, and I was invited to come several times, and I spoke with them. I also spoke with other groups within the community. It was really interesting listening to you just now, Livia, because you filled in some blanks for me that I was not really aware of that happened before I came. I had been teaching at the Rudolf Steiner School in New York City, which is the oldest school in the United States. And suddenly I found myself at the newest school in the United States, teaching kindergarten, a mixed age group, 3.5-year-olds through 5.5-year-olds. My family lived, Livia explained that the downstairs was the kindergarten, but actually my kitchen was adjoining that room. And my daughter, who was 2 at that point, would sit on the other side of the door, listening to all the things going on. She was learning the songs through the walls and through the door. So it was quite a transition for me when the day was over to be able to come through the door and she was still sitting there.
I was thinking, Eric, I would love to hear your impressions of what it was like to be the first teacher in a brand new school that was just starting up. How was that for you? And how did that begin the journey?
As I said, there was really a remarkable group of parents who were behind the school and ready to make sacrifices to make sure that the school succeeded. There were a lot of obstacles in the way, and there was a lot of work we had to do to fill out the class, make sure that we had a large enough class to support the building, the teacher, the overhead of the school. But the children were just remarkable. It was like it was that they had found each other, and these very strong bonds were established with the children. There was a lot of outreach that we needed to continue to do as the school year was going on. So I did a lot of speaking, a lot of being interviewed. I have a couple of articles that maybe at some point I can hand over to the school that report on the foundation of the school and what was going on in the classroom. It was tough. It was really tough going. I mean, my role as teacher was, of course, primary, but if the toilet was leaking, I had to fix the toilet for the children. When we needed paper towels, that needed to be ordered. So it was really, we were starting from almost nothing except for all this goodwill. But little by little, each year the school got stronger and began to grow, and it's so wonderful to see what it's become now, and I'm looking forward to reconnecting as much as I possibly can.
Thank you, Eric. That's so good. And Patricia, being as part of the administration, you'll appreciate the fact that there was no administration. Eric was the administration and the teacher, and there wasn't anything else except this incredible group of 12 families who really wanted this, and also some support from a few people in the community who were anthroposophists, people like Bill Bloom, who you still see his woodwork in the kindergarten, the little gnomes, the doorway that you walk through when you go into the kindergarten. These were from original years where Bill was a master wood carver and brought his beautiful art in the Waldorf style to the school. After 2 years in nursery kindergarten, we needed another building because we had to move on to first grade. So we found the building on Rocky Hill Road and Route 32, which is now, I believe, a dog kennel. By that time, our second son, Shiloh, was born. And then, of course, we had a third son, Gabriel, who all went through to the school. So we went up to, I believe, was it 5th grade, Eric? Do you remember in that building?
I was not there for long enough for there to be a 5th grade.
Okay, so you were there through 3rd grade, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and we had eurythmy also, right?
Yes.
So that was good. So after we outgrew that building, we found another building that was amazing. It was this Tilson Elementary School in Tilson. So again, if you go up 32 and you make a right on Tilson Road and go to the end, there's a one-story building that had a huge gym with a sprung floor, and every classroom faced out to the woods, and a huge yard and grass and places for the children to play. It was amazing. It was owned by the Kingston City School District, and eventually they needed the building back, but that was an incredible space, like I said. So there started to be a search for another building. And I was on the board at the time, and we looked at all different buildings in the whole area. We even looked at land. There were some parents who wanted to build, to start from scratch, and we found land in Cottakill. And there was a lot of just people not knowing which way to go, and people who wanted to build, and there wasn't really that interest in building so far away. Many of them dropped away. We found the building we're in now, which was the next iteration of school. And it was the quarters for the sisters at St. Joseph's Church. This is where they lived. This is where they, had their kitchen. This is what their living quarters. And I remember standing outside, and there was a lot of concrete all around. I remember standing outside with my friend Julian Studley, who was a realtor in the area, who's since passed away. I stood outside there with Julian saying, I don't know, what do you think? He said, this is a good deal, you should do it. It's funny, I don't have that kind of vision. I'm sure many of you have that kind of creativity where you can look at a place and see the whole thing. I couldn't do it. We bought the building, and with such loving hands and energy, parents just got in there, fixed it up, cleaned it up, renovated. Andrea Staffeld came down from Ithaca and did Leisure, and Leisured all the classrooms. All the classrooms are painted in a very specific way that match with Steiner's view of how children should be. There are layers of paint. There are fairies in the corners. You look in your kid's classroom and look for the fairies in the corners, you'll be surprised. So in that building, we're still there, but look at how beautiful it's become. The grass and the playground and just the beautification of the school has just always astounded me. Now, of course, we've spread out into we have a little enclave of houses and buildings. I love the way that we've grown within our means. There was a question of whether we should be out in the country the way Green Meadow is, Hawthorne Valley, but there was something about being right in the middle of town where we had access to Elting Library, Hasbrook Park, the rail trail, but more than that, to be a presence in town and not be removed, I think really set the school apart in a very unique, brave, and special way. So that's basically it. All my kids went through Mountain Laurel. Gabriel's the youngest, Shiloh and Elijah. Elijah's 42 now. He's going to be 43 in December. He was in the first graduating class, and I will say this is really amazing. Because of dissension in the school about where to build, not to build, where to go, we had lost a lot of the families from his class. This class was big, and it ended up with only 2 kids left at the end of 7th grade. So we thought it really doesn't make sense to go on. Let's graduate them at 7th grade. We had a beautiful ceremony with each of them got a globe, and it was just a beautiful ceremony. But also we had an opportunity for the 2 boys to go up to Hawthorne Valley and be in William Ward's class. He was just finishing up to 8th grade. They would just enter his 8th grade, and then they would continue on high school there. And those of you who don't know William or never heard of William Ward, he was a master teacher. Do you want to say anything about him, Eric?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that he was a mentor to the school really pretty much from the beginning. I reached out to him quite a number of times, and others did as well. He was really quite a resource for the school.
Yeah. And when the boys, Rio and Elijah, went up there to Hudson Valley to William's class, there were 28 kids in the class. So that made it like a whole other experience of Waldorf education for them. And then to be able to go through high school. I really think that Waldorf education prepared, I got to know a lot of the kids in class, but especially I have to say Elijah really prepared him for life in such a profound way. And I'll say that for all of my kids. We used to have a saying, Waldorf education, Mount Laurel doesn't prepare you necessarily for high school, but it prepares you for your life, preparing you for your life. It's easier to like get your chops, get a couple of tutors and just go into high school, but to prepare you for life is so profound. And to really have the values that we wish for for our children, not the superficial values, but the real deep values, I think is one of my biggest takeaways. I'm so happy that we went with Waldorf education. I work in the schools, I work in public schools, and I work at High Meadow also. And I want to say, I wish public education was what I was looking for, because it's free and it's there and it's also very inclusive. But I knew that it would not be right for my kids, that they really needed to nurture their spiritual selves, that their beings needed to be nurtured. They needed to be honored. And there's an honoring that happens in the Waldorf system, not only with age-appropriate curriculum, but the creativity to become thinkers, to become creators. There's an openness I don't feel is constricting. Sure, there's a structure. It's not like it's not structured, but there's an opening that I've always seen. What's coming to me right now is I really have to thank Judy Jekyll right now, who was pretty much the headmistress of the school for many years. And she so much was a keeper of the spirit of the school, as far as I can see. For years, many years, I taught my after-school classes at Mountain Laurel, starting in the Tilson School gym, where we had so much space to dance across the floor. And then coming to Mountain Laurel, we built the floor in the community room because it was just concrete. So we built a sprung floor on big rubber bumpers so that the children could have eurythmy and we could have our dance classes there. I just feel like the school is a being that's part of my psyche still. I was so happy to rejoin the board this year during COVID and just do whatever I can to help it become a place where other children and new families can flourish, can really thrive. It's a brave little school, and we have gone through lots of stuff, so much crisis. And I guess that's also the nature of, but we've come out each time with a new strength. And we've had to be brave about making choices for whatever needed to happen. Again, honoring the families, honoring the children. And I have to say, our teaching, I love our teaching staff. Our teaching faculty is so outstanding. And to have that for Mountain Laurel is just the best. I have to tell you, I used to call it the Renegade School, the Renegade Waldorf School, because we don't necessarily, how can I say, we make experiments. We move in the direction that we need to move in, and we're not dogmatic. And that's a big thing for Mountain Laurel, I have to say. And even though it's very much in Waldorf tradition, a very faculty-run school, there's still room for parents to be able to ask questions, to be a part of supporting the school and sustaining the school. And that's just amazing. Every time I would come into school to teach in the after-school program, I would see all these kids and all these families and parents that I did not know, did not recognize. And that made me feel so good that this little seed of a school is constantly blossoming. And being on the board, I will say that we are doing really well. And it's because of all of you who are gifting us your children and your support and your love. It's the community that makes the school be what it is. But I want some questions. Who has a question? Who has an answer?
Let me just say one thing, which is that you can trace a line in terms of the history of the school and its growth. And at each stage of growth, there are tremendous decisions to be made and a lot of work to be done. So the school started as a nursery kindergarten program, and immediately there was a group of parents that wanted to see a first grade happen. That was months of intense conversation and work to understand what needed to be done in order to make that happen, or whether it was too early for that to happen. And over the course of my tenure at Mount Laurel, certainly there were several periods where we had to ask ourselves the question of, do we have the strength? Do we have what it takes to continue to grow, or do we need to put the brakes on for a bit?
Yeah, that is so true. And I see those markers in my mind and feel them. Also, because we're small, you feel those places even bigger, because you don't have the multitude to diffuse the issues that come up. I have to say, I'm so impressed with the administration, which has to be very solid and holding the center. And I'm so impressed with the faculty. Each person is just amazing.
What's so amazing about you, Olivia and Eric, is that you were pioneers. So you had that pioneer spirit. And for many years, the school really, that impulse was driven by that incredible pioneer spirit. And then little by little, we got established. And now we are an established school with an established faculty and strong parent body. And so I was really curious to hear you speak, to just have a feeling of how it is to be a pioneer. And you really totally delivered, you and Eric too. It's so wonderful to hear that incredible pioneering impulse from both of you. So we're very grateful that we are here, thanks to that incredible impulse.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you. I didn't know if there's a written down history that contains your story and the story of the school and the stories of the families who were original to it, or the descendants of those families, or the children who went to the first few classes and what it felt like. So I thought I'd ask that question. Do you know?
Yes, actually, Kati, if you go on our Mount Laurel website, there's a page about the history of the school, and there's some old pictures from when it was just a mansion and when it was a Catholic school. It's really pretty interesting. It talks about David Clark, who was one of the founding families, and he still has the original charter at his house, his wife actually. And I think we speak about them on the website. His wife, Kathleen Clark,
it was Barbara
Clark.
Yeah.
She was the first administrator in a sense. She really got the money together to buy the building, and she worked 24/7 in making this happen. Really a true gift. She passed away quite young. Yeah, very sadly.
No, go ahead.
I think David Clark actually wrote an essay that appeared in one of the newsletters that went out several years ago from the school. So maybe we could track that down. I could certainly ask David about it.
Yeah.
That would be great, Eric, if you could. That'd be wonderful. And I have something I'd love to share with people, not today, obviously, because I don't have it with me, but Elijah's 9th birthday party, he was in 3rd grade at the time, and 3rd grade studies the Old Testament. So his birthday party, the whole class was there, and they're on my deck outside reciting Bereshit, which is the first opening of the Torah that they learned.
Genesis.
Of Genesis. Yeah. And they just did it like this is what we do. And it was so heartful. All the recitation, they did what they do, Horatius at the Bridge, which is like 6-minute recitation. And it's crazy, but it just grew something in them. All of that fine literature, fine teaching, fine work, fine crafts. There's a quality that really stayed with them, I believe.
I'm fantasizing about a small pamphlet that children can hold in their hands with a few pictures that engage them in the history of their own school. So I don't want to jump the gun, but I'm already thinking, oh, how can the children have access?
That's a beautiful idea.
We do have the newsletters still. These were newsletters that were not digital, but we have them in binder. So I can see if I can find David Clark's essay.
Yeah, we've been in touch with him. I want to say again, thank you so much for bringing up his wife, Barbara Clark, because Barbara really was the power force that was behind all the parents. She was the one that was the center of this and got so much done in terms of getting the school established the way it is. So I'm so glad you mentioned her, because somehow she needs to be honored and coming through, which she does anyway, but it's good. It's good.
A wonderful person to speak to about the history of the school is also, of course, Judy Jekyll. She has an incredible, she's a great storyteller too. I worked for many years with Judy, and this is how I know a lot about the history of the school. Is she just regales you with stories and wonderful memory. And she has contact with most of these people still that you mentioned, Livia, and you too.
Wonderful. So good. Good. Well, we're around if people have other questions that you didn't think of today. I'm happy to speak with anybody. Eric, do you have anything else to say?
Let me just say one thing, because you were talking about the third grade. I have been a nursery and kindergarten teacher for 35 years. I had to step in to take over the third grade at Mountain Laurel when the teacher of the second grade, during that summer, she gave birth and she was not really able to take the class into third grade. And that was a really humbling experience, but it really made me understand in a deeper way the wisdom that's behind the curriculum of the Waldorf School that Rudolf Steiner left as a kind of blueprint for moving forward. There's a connection with the Old Testament, but really what the third grade curriculum does is it makes children pay attention to the basic needs of humanity, building understanding about food. And we took the kids to the farm up in Harlemville, understanding that you need a roof over your head. And we built a playhouse together on the property at Rocky Hill Road at that time. As you move through the curriculum over the years, and most of you probably already know this, but it really talks to this stage of development that the children are at in a very remarkable way. I'm so happy that the school has gained strength over the years and has built to what it is now. And Livia, thank you for everything that you brought to the school.
I love the little school. She is a being. She is a being unto herself. And we are all invited to be part of her life and to help make her life what it is. I really always saw her that way. And I always speak about her for some reason. It's a she. I've always had this dream of children loving to come to school. And they do. They love it because it is there to embrace them. There's a real embracing and love of learning, love of being, love of connecting with nature and with each other and with the history of the world and where we are now and where we're going. I just think it's such great preparation for life. I'm so happy to meet all of you. Wow, so good, really good.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Really, it makes me feel so much more rooted in this school, which I think is especially important this year where everybody doesn't feel very rooted. We're connecting electronically. We have so many new families to the school, but also to the area. I feel this sort of this origin story really helps us feel more deeply seated in the tradition that we are part of and this legacy. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. And I was thinking with the closing verse, if you just say the line after me, it's just a beautiful way that we often open a meeting or close a meeting. And this would be so nice. One of my favorite Steiner quotes. You'll know this one, Eric. The healthy social life is only found when in the mirror of each human soul, the whole community finds its reflection. And when in the community, the virtue of each one is living. So good. Thank you, everybody. So good to see you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for organizing, Kate.
My absolute pleasure.